John, let's talk about Uber. Can you just start us off by saying what's happened at Uber in the last few weeks and over the last couple of years?
Well, Uber has a reputation for being an incredibly aggressive ride-hailing company. That's its whole kind of business model. But this year it's been enmeshed in a whole series of scandals, which really kicked off in February when Susan Fowler, one of the engineers at Uber, wrote this really incredibly heartfelt and damning blog post about Uber and the sexist, misogynist, bullying culture that there was at the company. And this was followed by a number of other scandals that happened at the company. And Travis Kalanick, the founder and CEO of the company, was also caught on camera berating one of Uber's own drivers, which really was pretty terrible PR. So there was a big kind of bust up in terms of Uber's public image and relations with its investors. Kalanick commissioned a report, or the board commissioned a report into the behavior at Uber. He agreed to step aside from the company initially, to take a leave of absence from the company.
Not resign then,
that was initially the case, and he said that he wanted to reflect on his experience and come back as Travis 2.0. But then in a subsequent meeting with investors, there does appear to have been some kind of dust-up there, and Kalanick resigned from the company.
What's interesting in this story is that it seems that nobody's disputing that a lot of pretty nasty stuff has happened, and we could add accusations about how they treat their drivers. They apparently try to game the Apple App Store system, and including some things they weren't supposed to in the app, trackability and so on. Lots of things. Nobody seems to dispute many of the facts around that, but at the same time a lot of people are saying, but look, they're really shaking up the industry for the good. So I think the big question people are disagreeing on is this sort of aggression or aggressiveness, is it, to use a tech term, is it a feature or a bug? Is it something that's necessary to be a disruptive industry, newcomer to the industry?
The question which you're asking, which is far more relevant to the ongoing success of the company, is its whole kind of business model itself inherently flawed because it is so aggressive it's going to alienate the drivers and riders and consumers on which its success is ultimately dependent. And I guess on that score, we just don't know at the moment. I mean, there are a number of companies who are trying to compete against Uber, trying to exploit the fact that Uber has such an aggressive reputation in the marketplace.
The FT ran a piece just recently on one of these rivals, Lyft, which apparently has been gaining market share in part on the back of an anti-Uber campaign, an explicit anti-Uber campaign. Yeah. So do you think rivals are really using this against them successfully?
Well, I mean, Uber's argument all along has been that it has to be a disruptive company because they're competing against taxi companies in many cities around the world, which do tend to be very cartelized. And so they wanted to bust open these cartelized markets to provide a better service for consumers and to draw marginalized workers into the workforce. And I think in some countries that has happened. So I think they have been doing some good. But their critics, of which there are many, many people, would argue that they are also acting in an unbelievably aggressive way, trying to outcompete other firms. There is a kind of sense of regulatory arbitrage where they're pushing the regulations right to the limit, if not overstepping them, denying that any of their employees are actually employees. They're just contractors who are using the platform, which a number of judges in different jurisdictions has declared to be ridiculous. So I think they are going to attract competition precisely for the aggressive way in which they have behaved. But I mean, how do you see this issue of kind of the contestability of markets, which is really key in this?
So it seems to me that there are two countervailing forces here. So one is this idea we've now touched on, contestability, that anyone can design an app that's essentially a clone of Uber's or Airbnb's and market it and try to, if they treat drivers and customers better, take a smaller cut themselves, they should be able to gain market share quite easily. On the other hand, there are these network effects in the internet economy. They're not unique to the internet economy, but they're particularly strong in the internet economy because of two features. One is that expanding your supply is very cheap. Once you have the digital infrastructure in place, the app is there, adding another driver, adding another customer is virtually free for Uber or whichever provider it is themselves. So there's this very cheap scalability, and that means once you're in and you're dominant, it's very easy to remain dominant. And the more drivers and customers you have, of course, the better your product is, because there will always be more available cars or more rides for the drivers, so people will know that this is where you go. And the same principle can apply for a lot of other, essentially, platform businesses. So in theory, it's not clear which way it will go. Technologically, it's easy to come in and clone, but in terms of the economic structure, the cost structure of these sorts of platform businesses, it might actually be really hard to dislodge whoever gets in first. And that, I would guess, is probably a reason why a company like Uber is actually quite willing to burn a lot of money, and investors are prepared to see that happen, because if that's what it takes to establish that dominance, you might actually be able to defend it quite easily the day you start making money again, making a profit.